That's skew. That looks pretty skew. Let's just straighten that up a bit. There we go. Is that less skew? Possibly. Anyway, he's alive! It's amazing. We now know his name and we know he's not dead. Isn't that amazing? So, a while ago, quite a few months ago actually, I was doing chapter reviews at the end of Wano, and we got to the part just before the big reveals of Luffy and his devil fruit and everything, where we had one of the CP0 agents interrupt Kaido, the same thing that happened to Odin before, and he presumably killed both Luffy and this masked CP0 guy. And for a long time, everyone on the internet was just kind of calling him all sorts of different things, myself included. I think I called him Bowler Hat Guy. Pretty boring name, but hey, we didn't know his name, so it was just kind of up in the air, whatever anyone wanted to call him. But now we both know that he is one named Guernica, and two somehow not dead. So yeah, this is this is going to be interesting. Even when I did the chapter reviews before, I was convinced he was dead. Like I was amazed because we kind of saw this guy and he was involved in the story, and he was even involved in the main story, like the big fight, Luffy versus Kaido. He was up there. He was on the Skull Dome, and then he died without us even learning what his name was. But now we both know what his name was and the fact that he is most likely still not dead, which is just wild. Nobody dies in One Piece. But anyway, let's get into it. This is going to be all of the information from SBS 104. This comes to us from Arthur at the Library of O'Hara. He posts a lot of really good stuff about One Piece. His theory videos are very good. He's a very invested fan, and I greatly appreciate everything he does for the One Piece community, especially because it helps people like me who don't have the time or Japanese knowledge or any of those things to delve in and kind of translate things early and get a real good lens on what's actually happening in the story, both inside the main story and outside during SBSs and things like that. So, let's get started. So, the four CP0 agents that have been introduced fairly recently into the story have gone unnamed for a really long time, but now I will pop them up on the screen. We'll go from, I guess, left, right. We'll go from right to left, and we have Joseph, Maha, Gizmonda, I think is how you say that, and then Guernica. So for a very long time, I thought Guernica was actually this guy over here with like the yellow beard and he looked like a pineapple to me, not Marco, the other guy. I thought that guy was Guernica because he's the only one who escaped from Wano and Onigashima and that whole situation, because he was just kind of geppoing away at the end of that fight where who was actually Guernica died. Joseph was actually running away, which is a very Joseph thing to do. That's actually quite funny. Anyway, he was geppoing away back to the world government ships, and I think he was actually on the call with Ryokugyu. So he was definitely like present in the story after all this had happened, but especially because he even tipped his hat to Guernica's passing when Kaido absolutely obliterated him on the roof. I thought that Joseph was the only one who survived. We did know Maha before because Maha was fighting with who was it? It was Drake and Apu. I think it was Maha and Joseph were fighting him at the time, unless Guernica was there. I'll check now and put various pictures up to make this a lot more sensible. Sensical? Sensible, whatever. So we do know that Maha was there because Maha was actually killed by Izo. Again, we don't know if Maha is actually dead because One Piece, but Izo fought Maha and one of the other guys, and they were there. And then Guernica was up on the roof, and then when Guernica was about to be squished, he tipped his hat as well as Joseph tipped his hat. Now, in the chapter review, I was pretty sure that he was dead, mostly because Luffy died in that time as well because he was knocked out by Kaido, but Kaido was sure that he was dead. Even earlier in the Kaido fight, he remarked that after that combo attack, he could still hear their voices, meaning that when he killed Luffy, he could no longer hear his voice, and everyone else, Momo and I think it was Law. I don't think Kid would have known because I don't know if he has the same spec for that, but they all kind of remarked that, hey, Luffy's voice has just kind of disappeared, and then it reappeared when he, wasn't dead anymore. So we do know that Maha was there, Joseph was there. I don't think Gizmondo was ever there. there was that moment where Guernica was kind of just squished by Kaido, and Joseph kind of tipped his hat in a very respectful way. And I went, oh, okay, so he can hear that Guernica's voice has disappeared. So that is the understanding I got there, that it is the confirmation that Guernica had died. So anyway, after all of the things happened at Wano and Onigashima and the day was saved and all, it was reported by one of the Marines to the Gorosei that the picture that they were, all aggravated about for Gear 5 Luffy was actually submitted by Guernica of CP0. So I thought that would have been who Joseph turned out to be, because we saw him running away, and that indicated that he must have been at least nearby when the Gear 5 thing was happening. So I thought that it would have been somebody like that who'd escaped and definitely made it back to the royal government and therefore would have been able to send the pictures in. But we actually know that Guernica is the one who sent the picture in, and this guy over here is Guernica. So if he survived to take the picture of Gear 5 Luffy, that he must have been alive after that attack from Kaido. Yeah, now we have confirmation on that. So it's really cool that we do have these SBSs. We have these little bits of information that Oda drops that actually mean an incredibly large amount. So, Bowler Hat Guy is still alive, and his name is actually Guernica. I'm glad we're solving all these mysteries. So, next thing we're going to go on to, I wanted to get the Guernica thing out the way first because there was a lot on my mind for that. The next thing is actually the most important thing in the whole SBS, is we finally have personifications for Zoro's Haramaki and his earrings, which is really cool. I really like the personification gag, especially because a little while ago there was a lot of meaning to that, given the personification of both Wado Ichimonji and Enma, given that they were made by the same person, Kozaburo, and we had that personification revealed just a couple weeks before we actually met Kozaburo. And the amazing thing we learned about that is the person who made those swords, being Kozaburo, looks shockingly similar to the personifications of those swords. So that, made me start thinking about, well, if Yoru is the same kind of deal, was Yoru actually smithed by a woman? That would be quite interesting. The one for Sandai Kitetsu is that kind of similar. Hasai Kai, Yamato's side boob, that one's a little bit weird actually. So that one may be a little bit different from the rest, but I wonder where the line on that really is. So we found out now that we have Haramakiko, which is Zoro's Haramaki personified, which is just kind of an old woman lying down with long hair, and the long hair looks a lot like Zoro's Haramaki pattern, which is quite cool. I actually wonder why he wears the Haramaki. I think it might just be an old samurai thing. I know that he wears it so that he can have his swords on it in the pre-time skip. So we have a really cool Haramakiko, which is quite fun, and then the Pierce Triplet Sisters, which are I guess an old one, a happy one, and then kind of a chilled out one. There's probably like almost similar to the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil thing. There might be some kind of traditional indication here that I'm not aware of, but I think it's very cool, especially as someone who's a huge Zoro fan and, has my own Pierce Triplet Sisters. I think it's quite cool to find these things out. Now we're going to go on to the Toby Ropo's hobbies. So first we have Who's Who. Who's Who is an interesting character. I really like the deception with his sword, because his saya was like a proper long katana saya, and then he unsheathes his sword and it's that tiny little knife that he used with flying attacks. That was very neat. He was kind of a hit and miss character for me when I was reading through Onigashima the first time. Especially because it was weekly. Every time he showed up, I thought it was more interesting that we got more lore on Nika, and I found his fight with Jinbei very compelling. I just didn't really like Who's Who. He's a bit of a dick. And I don't know, I didn't really invest too much in him, but I thought he was quite cool. I thought he was quite interesting, especially with the sword technique. And his favorite game is gambling. Just card-specific gambling, so poker and things like that. But not poker, because that would probably be poker's favorite hobby. So the thing that I kind of get here is there was that deception with his sword being shorter than the saya led him to be. So maybe that's the influence I get there, that he's quite a deceptive poker face kind of person, although not this poker face, just a regular poker face. Anyway, moving on. Black Maria. Black Maria, unsurprisingly, likes boxing and romance. We saw both of these. She had both of these pastimes with Sanji when he was captured, because she was trying to seduce him fairly successfully, as well as beating him with brass knuckles. So That was pretty cool, and hers is just kind of on display. We know that already. So, moving on. We have X-Drake. X-Drake is a reptile maniac and enjoys astrophysics, which is okay, that's very weird. One of them very on brand. He got the Allosaurus fruit. That's really good. I mean, if he just kind of got the mammoth fruit, that would have been pretty lame. So he's a reptile maniac. He really enjoys researching and studying reptiles, which is pretty interesting. So he's got a really good devil fruit to understand reptiles now, I suppose. And astrophysics. I wonder if there's a connection between that and like Vegapunk or something, because astrophysics seems a little bit out there. I know that Drake seems quite smart, or, quite headstrong at least, but I didn't really peg him as an astrophysicist, so I guess we'll see if that comes up with a little bit more relevance later. Sasaki, very easy, sake brewing. He was drinking buddies with Kyoshiro, so sake brewing, very reasonable hobby for him to have. Ulti enjoys accessory crafting and bullying her little brother. One of those we know, one of them seems a little bit odd, but I guess she always has that mask on, except for that one panel where she didn't, which has been revised in the official chapters, or the official tankobons actually. So this is quite fun, even when there's a drawing error in the actual manga online. When we get the official tankobons, a lot of them get fixed. So Ulti's mask being gone is one of those kinds of things that was fixed in the official tankobons. So accessory crafting probably for the mask and things like that, and then bullying her little brother. And then page 1 enjoys fishing, but probably just because he wants to be left alone, which I think is quite fun. I don't imagine any of the other Toby Roper would really like fishing, so that's probably why he picked it, because it's solitary and quiet and he can just go and do his own thing. So that's quite fun. Oh, actually, now that I think about it, Spinosauruses were known to be aquatic dinosaurs, especially because part way through Wano, they discovered some more. Scientists discovered more fossils of Spinosauruses and determined that they have a more fish-like tail. So Oda actually heard of this and then adjusted page 1's dinosaur form to be more inclusive of that fishy kind of design. One thing I have heard about Spinosauruses is they're predatory fishers. So they do actually, or not now, but I assume back in the day, how they hunted in the old times is they actually used to swim through the water and hunt fish and other prehistoric creatures. So I think fishing is quite fitting, considering he is based on an aquatic dinosaur. So that's pretty neat. Okay, had to take a quick break there to learn how to weld. That's out of the way now. My eyesight is permanently damaged slightly more, so let's get back into this. So we do know from a few previous SBSs, is that skew? That's really bugging me. Can we just... Are you good now? You don't look like you're going to fall over. Okay, stay there, right? Okay, so we do know from previous SBSs that Kid and Killer have the same first crush or first love from the South Blue because they come from the same place. Her name was Victoria Shirton Duruyanaika, which, if I remember right, actually means to spill something on your shirt or something like that, somewhere along those lines. Victoria, Kid, and Killer were eating curry udon or curry noodles when they were younger, and they both looked up and saw that she had spilled it all over her shirt. And therefore they were laughing at her, and because of that, she decided that she never wanted to speak to them again and broke both of their hearts. So, nice little endearing story for the kid pirates. From, some of the most ruthless and brutal pirates we know in this story to have such a cute little backstory. So in this SBS, we go a little bit deeper into that. We found out that Kid, Killer, Wire, and Heat all come from that same place in the South Blue, where they were leaders of various gangs in the area. So Victoria, that we mentioned before, was killed in a gang war from the ruling gang of that area, because instead of having like a king and a country and everything, this island was run by the gangs. So Victoria was killed by the gangs, and that kind of inspired Kid to rise up and get the other people around him under his own name and his own crew, essentially, which would be Killer and Wire and Heat, and kind of just take over the whole area and then venture out to the sea. This drove Kid mad. He just went over the deep end, way more so than when he was actually turned down by this woman. And then he united the four gangs and kind of took over the ruling area. He just kind of instilled a coup and just claimed the whole area. Kind of like Bartolomeo did in the east, but with Kid in the south. So it says here, after that event, Kid didn't want to live in such a confined world. And that's very interesting because that sounds just like Kozuki Yoden, with the whole country is being too restrictive. It's too constrained. He can't stay here. He's being suffocated. And then he just kind of formed a pirate crew with the other leaders and went out as the Kid Pirates. So once they set out to sea, being Kid and Killer being the captain, the vice captain, and then I guess Heat and Y are the next in line in the crew. They're the most prominent members that we're aware of. And they sail on the ship that we know as the Victoria Punk, which this all makes a lot more sense now. And that's actually really sweet because, I mean, we've seen Punk Gibson, Gibson Slam, was it? Slam, yeah, Gibson Slam. So he's got all these hard rock kind of move naming schemes in his attacks. Punk Rotten, I suppose, as well. So the Victoria Punk, very cool name for the ship, and also in honor of Victoria. How do we say that name? Doryanaika, which is their childhood friend and crush. So actually a little bit of levity and a bit of a sweet story for these brutal kid pirates. So that's quite cool. I quite like that. So next we're going from one redhead to another, from Kid to Shanks. And Oda gives us a little bit more of a breakdown on the kind of structure and scale of Shanks's crew. So Shanks's crew, I mean, we have always known it was quite a small crew back when Luffy knew them in the East Blue. And they did have a few extra members kind of palling around with them then. But as a Yonko, we now understand that he has a lot more people on his crew. They do refer to him as Oyabin, if I remember right. I don't know if it's the same Oyabin, it's Big Boss. I don't know if it's the same one that they used for Jinbei down in Fishman Island, because Oyabin is kind of like boss or great boss, Dai Oyabin, something like that, along those lines. But they actually do call him Big Boss Shanks on the crew. His commanders call him that, or, you know, the rookie pirates like Rockstar that join him also call him that. So it is quite indicative of a bigger crew, but we never really see that. In Marineford, we saw the Red Force pull up, and the Red Force is huge and had a lot of people on it, but the main threat there were the commanders of the Redhead Pirates, and they were all there in one go. What we learn here is Shanks and the Redhead Pirates do actually have quite a few members. They just don't move in force as one unit very often. I always thought that Shanks had a very small, strong crew, kind of like Luffy does, very much like Luffy does, just on a slightly bigger scale. But it does seem that he has a lot more rookie people that have joined him. He just doesn't need them all the time, which, you know, does make sense. It also says here that the Redhead crew has many other subordinate pirate crews under its umbrella, the same way that Luffy does with a bunch of the other New World captains in his Grand Fleet. Shanks also has a bunch of other existing crews that fall under his umbrella. So the Redhead Pirates is quite a big and very formidable force in the world. Although it is stated here as well that he kind of views this in a very similar way to Luffy, where he doesn't really rule over all of them, kind of like, I guess Whitebeard didn't either, but definitely how Blackbeard does with a lot of his people, and how Buggy does with a lot of his people. He just rules over them as a great pirate. We now know that neither Shanks nor Luffy really like this kind of mentality, and they just kind of have them under the umbrella of their name. So during the raid, we had a little bit of a strange moment. I think it was in the chapter Odin's beloved sword Enma, which was when Zoro was fighting King, and it just kind of flared up from the shamisen music that was playing, and that was because Hiyori was just over there trying to ensnare Orochi and trap him and get him murdered. Not by her own hand for some reason, but, you know, whatever. It was then. And myself and many other people were kind of curious, how did Hiyori get to the raid? I mean, she was definitely left behind before because she didn't want to see anyone that was specifically mentioned. So just like Otama, she just kind of arrived. And she arrived straight to the treasure repository room, which was very specific because that's quite a ways into the castle. As you would imagine, being a treasure room, it's quite well hidden. Or at least you have to go through a lot to get there. But it is confirmed in this SBS that she used her connections as the Oiran to going to these castles and hosting these events and all of those connections to go through with a bunch of the treasure to this treasure repository. Now, how that specifically works, I have no idea. I imagine it has something to do with Denjiro, at least him trying to organize crates that go there and understanding when they go there, and Hiyori as well would know when they go there, which ones to sneak into to get in there, so we don't go into like huge specifics as far as I'm aware, but we do know that it's her connection of being the Oiran to that castle that she knows how to get into the treasure repository room with the shipments. So she did kind of appear out of absolutely nowhere in the raid, but it's not absolutely completely nowhere. It is vaguely explained, so that's pretty neat. I don't really care for a very specific breakdown of this. I mean, I wasn't really that bothered by it before, but it is nice to get a little bit of kind of a full circle image on how those two things connected and how we didn't see her at all through the raid or going to go past anyone in that massive fight. She just kind of was there already. So I think that's quite satisfying, actually. Now, this one is really quite strange. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but it just seems a little bit contradictory here. It says Oda confirms Reiju's powers are an effect of her raid suit. And the thing about that is, that's cool, because we thought it was before a devil fruit, because that's what Oda said, and then I think he changed his mind. I can't remember clearly, but the general consensus was it was a devil fruit. She's the only one who has the devil fruit, and then we kind of backtracked on that, because no, it's not. It's part of the scientific advancements. So it says here that though he adds that since Judge already made the bodies of his children to adapt to their respective powers from the start, Reiju can do some things like suck poison out without the need of her raid suit. So that seems a little bit weird to me. That means that the raid suit is the thing that gives her powers, except for her main power, which comes from not using the raid suit. That's just genetically there. That doesn't really make sense to me. Like, is it the raid suit or is it not the raid suit? So where I think this comes down to is kind of like Sanji. Sanji's got some base performance enhancements. That sounds really weird, but it's true. He's a lot faster. He's a lot stronger. He's a lot more durable. All of those things after putting on the raid suit, which is now his latent genes awakening, essentially. So in that way, he doesn't need the raid suit on to get the bonuses that he's currently got, which are the insane durability, which is when, Queen hit him in the face with that sword and it just broke, and, coiled him up and his legs bent, but then he was able to bend himself back, as well as being able to use high-level techniques like Ifrit Jambe. So I think that's really, really cool. But it seems a little bit weird for Reiju. The sucking poison out thing seems a little bit different from durability and all those things, because all of the siblings have that durability. I guess Yonji is a little bit stronger, but can't really use his winch fingers outside of his raid suit. Niji, we've seen him use Henry Needle, I think it was, when he was fighting Sanji. Neither of them had raid suits on at that time. It was in the cloning thing. So they do have access to some capacity of their powers without their raid suits, just inherently because of how they've been designed. So I think that's where we are here. It's not a devil fruit, and it's not only because of her raid suit. It's part of her genetics that are just enhanced by her raid suit. So we'll leave it at that. Okay, now, arguably one of the most important parts of this SBS, somebody has asked, does Yamato wear underwear or a fundoshi? Which I think that after the Zoro question, that's got to be the most important information in this whole SBS. But if any of you don't know what a fundoshi is, if you've played Ghost of Tsushima or if you've watched Wano, there's actually quite a display of them, which sounds really weird. When Odin was dancing naked, he had that little cloth that was kind of covering him. This is called a fundoshi. It's a very typical, or rather very traditional samurai form of underwear. You'll see it in a lot of anime. It's even in Black Clover. Yami, and by extension Magna, wears a fundoshi because it's very manly and it's a very samurai thing to do. Maybe I should get a fundoshi. We'll figure that out later. But a fundoshi is just kind of a cloth style of underwear. If you play Ghost of Tsushima, you know that I think it's at the end of the game in hard mode or something. One of the modes, you can play the game again, but only in fundoshi. So you don't have any like armor or stats or boosts or anything. It's literally underwear. So the reason this person is asking is, well, obviously, but well, the main thing is Yamato is female, but declares herself as Odin and male, and Odin was a samurai, and Odin also wore a fundoshi because he was a samurai, so obviously Yamato would wear the fundoshi as well because she is Odin and she is a samurai. So I think that's quite cool, just a little bit of character building on top. I like the extent to which we understand Yamato's obsession with Odin and his viewpoint on being free and being himself. I think it is really cool, even down to the smallest details that hopefully most people don't know about, is that she doesn't wear underwear, she just wears fundoshi. And that would be why we get so much side boob, is because she's not actually wearing underwear. And fundoshi don't like really come with an upper part, as far as I'm aware anyway. So yeah, that's that. Now going on to the next one. So, now for something that we've desperately needed in One Piece. Another background character. This is actually something I did want without really knowing it. So, during the chaos of the wrap-up of Wano and just kind of the partying and everything, that as we were winding down, even though it wasn't much of a wind down to some extent, we did get this guy kind of shoved in there out of absolutely nowhere. When I first saw him, I thought, should I be recognizing this guy? Should I know who this is? I don't know if he was before, but in 1053, this chef guy is known to be Senori Kyuru-san, master of tea ceremonies, and is considered the best cook in the Wano country, which makes sense. He was making the food for the shogun and the saviors of the country at the end, and he made that huge 15-course meal or whatever it was, that the only person who stayed behind to eat it was Jinbei, because of course he did. I love that scene. Jinbei's so cool. So this guy is called Senori Kyuru-san. He is most likely based on Sennorikyu, an historical figure who pioneered the art of tea ceremonies. I just like that this is kind of what One Piece is about. We've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of background characters that we never know if we'll see again, but they just make this world so much richer and so much more detailed with all the small bits of thought that Oda puts into their characters and their names and everything like that. So I'm not going to jump too heavily into this. It's the tea ceremony guy. He's a chef. That makes a lot of sense to me. There's probably a little bit more to be found, but we'll leave it there for now because we have to go on to the final, and it really doesn't bother me that much. But if you guys want beauty tips, we've got how Nami stays on her beauty regimen. So let's get into that. It is saunas created by Zeus. That makes a lot of sense. She kind of created saunas before anyway, so she didn't really need Zeus for that, but cool, we'll take it. Massages from Robin. Let's not dwell on that one. Let's just move swiftly along. Oh, because of multiple hands. That makes a lot of sense. Still, don't dwell on it. Proper nutrition from Sanji. This is something we've known for a long time, and he's even said on a few occasions now, I think, that he's giving them food that will help fill out their bodies or like be ideal for their bodies or something like that. I try not to pay attention to Sanji in those instances. Lotions, creams, and more created by Chopper. Again, very sensible. Hair care help from Brook. Now, that's one I didn't think about too much, but Brook does take great care of his afro, especially because it's not going to grow back again if it gets burnt or lost or cut. So he takes great care of his afro, especially considering he's what, like 80 years old now? 90 years old? I think he's 88. Or is it? He was 88 and now he's 90. That's right. So it's just a nice little crew activity where everyone kind of pitches in a little bit to help Nami with her beauty regimen, which is quite fun. And then the last one is exercising. I don't ever see Nami exercising unless she's running away or in a fight, but apparently she finds time for that outside of that. So yeah, that's quite the regimen. I don't think I'll be following any of it, especially because some of it requires a sentient thundercloud, a devil fruit woman, although she would be quite fun. I'd love to meet Robin. Proper nutrition from Sanji sounds great. I don't have a Sanji, nor do I have a Chopper or a skeleton with an afro. So I've got a lot of things to work on to kind of get my beauty regimen up, but we'll get there eventually. So yeah, that's everything from SBS 104. The main thing for me was Guernica, because that was big news. That was great, especially because for such a long time, I've been wondering if we're ever going to touch on that again, if we're ever going to see who this guy was or why he was important or even learn his name. We have that now. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.